Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar today, where we'll discuss various different strategies and tactics that may help you unlock financial freedom. Especially for those of you who are saving to purchase their first home, or maybe you're tuning in on behalf of a loved one, there are quite a few different tools available to make this process a little easier. We will also touch base on different ways that you can maximize your tax deductions this year and going forward into future years. My name is Chelsea Chartrand, and beside me is Derek Dudka. We are financial planners at the Dudka Wealth Planning Group of Asante Financial Management. Before we get started today, there are a few items to keep in mind. You will notice that you are muted and your cameras are off. Please make sure that remains as muted and off during the webinar. We will be recording this presentation for viewing at a later time. And at the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat box. If you think of any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat function on Zoom, and we will answer them at the end. All right, so looking at today's agenda, we will begin with goal setting and how to set yourself up for success when creating these goals. We will discuss a few different points on the importance of investing and some considerations to keep in mind. We will then get into the nitty-gritty of RSPs, which is a registered retirement savings plan, tax-free savings accounts, and the new first home savings account. We will break down what each one is, the benefits, the most optimal scenario for when you would use any of these investment vehicles, and then putting them all together at the end to see how they differ from one another. Derek, please start us off with goal setting.
All right. I'm a big fan of goal setting, and so we're going to talk about setting some clear goals. The clearer your goals are, the easier it is to see them and to achieve them. We're going to talk about SMART goals, which many of you may have heard of: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And then we've got goals. Some are for this year. Maybe we want to go on a vacation. Some we want to retire or want to make a major purchase 2 or 3 years down the road. So we've got different time frames, and we have to prioritize what's most important right now and how can we work towards all of our goals. And it seems to work best if you have a clear picture in your mind, or if you can actually find a physical picture. If you're dreaming for a particular type of car, get a picture of it, keep it someplace where you can see it, helps with the motivation, and keeps you going on days when you don't feel like it. So let's take a little deeper dive into what a SMART goal is. So I'm going to use the example because it's very easy to include all of these things with a weight loss program. So specific, you can't just say, I want to lose some weight. You need to say, I want to lose 10 pounds. So that's moving right into the next one. It's measurable. I take my weight today, and I know that, okay, now I need to drop 10 pounds so I can measure my progress along the way. Needs to be achievable. If I can't reasonably expect to accomplish it, then I'm just setting myself up for failure, and I'll beat myself up. So if I said I wanted to lose 10 pounds by this weekend, that's really not likely going to be achievable unless I try and starve myself or something like that. So you have to make sure that we can reasonably accomplish it. It has to be relevant. Weight loss actually for me isn't really that relevant because I'm not overweight. I could lose some weight, but it's not a big thing. For me, maybe turning to a fitness level, I want to maintain fit so that I can be active with my grandchildren because they are getting quite boisterous and active, and I want to be able to keep up with them and have fun with them. So that would be my the relevancy for trying to stay fit and going to work out 3, 4, or 5 times a week. And time-based. So it's tied in again with the weight one, is that 10 pounds by this weekend might not be a reasonable goal, but 10 pounds in 1 month or 2 months, depending again what your particular situation is and if you've got any health conditions or whatever. But sometime that is a bit of a stretch for you, but that if you apply yourself, then you would be able to achieve it. That's setting SMART goals.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek. So now once we've created our goals, we need to work on our budget to ensure we have enough funds to help reach those goals. For example, maybe you have a goal to have X amount of money put aside to purchase your first home. You'll need to determine how much to save on a monthly or annual basis in order to reach this goal. So we start off with tracking our expenses. It's important to see where we currently spend our money and how much to each category. This exercise will help us determine if we are overspending or maybe undersaving, which leads us into point number 2, where we will bring in those SMART goals that we just talked about to establish financial objectives and to guide our budgeting decisions and prioritize savings. You will then divide your income into categories. What are my necessary expenditures? What are my wants? And what do I need to save to reach my goals? After those first 3 steps, you can start working towards your goals. However, it is important to revisit and adjust your budget regularly. For example, if there is a new addition to your monthly spending, like maybe you got a new car and now you have a car loan payment, or if your car insurance payment has increased, you'll need to set some time aside to review and modify your budget as needed. You might wonder, how do I divvy up my income? How much should be allocated to my needs, my wants, my savings? We like to use the 50-30-20 rule, so let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So by using the 50-30-20 rule as your guideline, you can create a budget that sets you up for success. When allocating your income, 50 of it can be allocated to your necessities or your must-haves, like housing, transportation, insurance, groceries. We all need shelter and food to keep us healthy. Then you can allocate 30% of your income to wants. We like to call it fun money, but this would go towards dining out at restaurants, going shopping, going towards your hobbies like going to the gym, golfing, etc. And the most important part is allocating some of your income to savings, or maybe your goal is debt repayment, so using a portion of your income each month to pay down debt. This 50-30-20 rule may seem a little overwhelming to some, and you don't have to use this format. It's purely just a guideline to get you started. One of the most important things that you can do today is to pay yourself first. Right when you get your paycheck, before you even start looking at these different expense categories, put a set amount of money aside into savings or paying down debt. Even if it's just $50 a month, that's powerful when you start early and utilize compounding. So we've created our goals. We've determined how much money we need to set aside to reach those goals. Now, an appropriate investment strategy may help achieve those goals faster. If you've been investing, even just over the past couple of years, you will know exactly what is happening on this graph that you see here. The cycle of investor emotions. This is the actual performance of the S&P 500, which is a stock market that tracks 500 of the largest companies in the United States. If you started investing in October of 2019, which you can see on the left-hand side here, you would have been very optimistic and even euphoric by the time February of 2020 came along. Little did you know you had reached the maximum point of risk, the top of the market. Come March 2020, the S&P 500, along with the rest of the stock market, very quickly came crashing down, as you can see on the chart. You would have experienced feelings of anxiety, panic, and eventually despair at the very bottom. At this point, many people had let their emotions take over and sold all their holdings, which resulted in a loss. However, you will see if you stuck to the plan and stayed invested, your despair would have turned into hope by the next month, then relief, and back to optimism, all within 4 months' time. So being conscious of your emotions is key to being a successful investor. Here are a few tips to keep in mind to avoid emotional investing. Number one, no one can time the market. Unfortunately, not even us, we don't have a crystal ball. So the key is to stay invested and follow your plan. Long-term investors are rewarded. As you experienced in early 2020, and again more recently in 2022, if you were an investor at that time, there is always short-term volatility, but it pays off to invest for the long run. Number three, diversification. We will actually touch base on this shortly in a couple slides, but diversification helps reduce risk in your portfolio. And lastly, you only lock in a loss when you sell at a lower price than what you had entered in at. One of our main jobs as financial planners is to walk our clients through these ups and downs and help them coach them through their emotions. The most important thing you can do is to stay invested. Now we're going to look at the difference and how risk and return correlates. Derek, why don't you walk us through that?
Okay, and I'm very thankful to say that none of our clients bailed out at the bottom of the market, either in 2022 or in 2020, because we've been talking about this diversification and long-term planning and so on. And part of that is because for many of our clients, we have some money set aside in cash or something that's very low risk, should they need it for emergencies and to tide them through when things go bad. And for the bulk of their portfolio that will be invested for a longer period of time, we can move up the risk scale to something that's more comfortable and also get a higher rate of return. So this simply really is a picture format of there is no free lunch. You can have something that's very safe, such as cash in your bank account, cash under your pillow, GIC. You earn a little bit of money, but you never ever will lose that dollar. You might lose it to inflation, but you don't lose the 100,000 or the $10 you got in your bank account or under your pillow. You still have it. So it's safe that way. If you want to get a little bit more income, we can loan our money to the government by buying a government bond. And the government never goes bankrupt. They just tax us more. So we don't have to worry about the government defaulting on it. We're just going to get a little higher interest rate than we do at the bank account. If we now want to take a little bit more risk, but still be very safe, we can loan our money to companies by buying corporate bonds. That's really just a loan to the company. And both the government bonds and the corporate bonds are guaranteed by the issuer. So when the government of Canada issues a bond, we're not too concerned about them defaulting. However, if we borrowed money from Canadian Tire or Bell or some smaller companies, we might be concerned. So those companies have to pay a little higher interest rate. And the more or less well-known, or sorry, the less well-known those companies are, the higher interest rate they have to pay because there's a little bit more risk. They're not as big of a company. So it's still interest and they're pretty safe. What does happen, though, as you may have experienced in 2022, when interest rates went from historically low rates and jumped up, we were stuck holding the old bonds and we're paying 1%, and now all the new bonds we're paying 3 or 4 or 5%. So as long as we held that bond, we're still going to get our 1% and get our $10,000 back at the end of the day. But if we tried to sell them to somebody else would want a 3% return instead of a 1% return. So they wouldn't give us full value. So even bonds can sometimes be risky in the short term if interest rates are rising. Then we go to large cap stocks. Companies, these are businesses. Bell Canada, Apple Computer, there's all sorts of large companies. Those are traditionally considered quite safe because they're large companies. They can make it through a recession and so on, but they still go down in value. Some of you have been around long enough to gone through the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. Everybody loves banks. Everybody knows how safe banks are. Most bank stocks dropped almost 50% within that 1 year period. Now, they quickly recovered because they didn't go out of business, but they needed to ride through that time frame. And the highest return that you can get on investments over the long term would be buying small companies. Again, this doesn't have to really be rocket science. Small companies, take for example, a company that only has 1% market share. If it gets up to 2 or 3% market share, it's now doubled or tripled its revenues. Its stocks are really going to be going up. Everyone's going to be working overtime and getting raises and bonuses. But if you've got a large company like Coca-Cola that already has 20 or 25 or 30% of the market share, if they gain 1% market share, it's not such a big deal for them. So the reason the small companies give this better return is because just like the large companies can ride through long recessions, small companies can't. During 2008, 2009, there were literally hundreds of smaller companies that went completely bankrupt, and people lost everything if they'd invested in those individual companies. Value stocks are similar in the sense that they can be large companies or small companies, but for whatever reason, their stocks are in distress. You could literally buy the stock, the company, and shut it down and sell off the real estate and its equipment and get more money than the stock is selling for. Why would a company sell for that low of a price? Well, because there's a significant risk that it would go out of business. So that's why if you wanted the best return, you would just invest in small cap and value stocks and forget about it. But you might have to wait 5 or 10 years sometimes for those to be better returns than some of the other investments. So it's important, as we'll talk about in a moment, about spreading your investments around. So as Chelsea had alluded to earlier, if we could time the market, which we can't, we're 100% accurate on past returns. We haven't been nearly as accurate on future returns. So this talks about the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies in the US, had excellent long-term returns over the last 30 years. 6.75% is annualized. But if you missed just a few of the best days, you would actually see a very poor return over that same entire 30-year period. As you can see on the graph on the right-hand side, if you'd missed just the best 50 days, that's only like 2.5 months worth of trading days because they only trade Monday to Friday. Minus 1.64%. That's incredible that you could have been out of the market just 50 days of the last 30 years and ended up with a negative return. So again, if you're in it for the long haul, you'll be in for all those good days. You'll also be in for the bad days, but there are more good days than there are bad days. So you end up with a much better return the longer you can hold on to the investments. And that leads us into how do we smooth out some of those bumps, which is diversification that we've alluded to earlier. Diversification simply means that old saying, don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So even when we buy a mutual fund that may have one line on it, say, oh, I've only got one line. Well, it could be a portfolio or a balanced fund, which is diversified in itself. So within the stock side of things, we can diversify geographically, some Canadian stocks, some US stocks, some stocks from other parts of the world. We can diversify by the type of investment. So we can have some bank stocks, we can have some healthcare stocks, we can have some pharmaceuticals, or that's healthcare. We can have some telecommunications. We can diversify by large companies and some small companies, so we can spread our risk around like that, because not every country, not every industry marches to the same drummer. Well, some are going up, some are going down. That helps smooth out that one particular area. Most of our portfolios also have a little bit of a real estate component in it. You have real estate because most of you will own a home or a cottage or a rental property. So that's a big part. We don't have anything to do with that, but that does diversify your portfolio overall. And within mutual funds, most of the funds have a small real estate component, which is consisting of commercial properties through real estate investment trusts. And these trusts typically don't own residential properties, although some do. Most of them would be commercial, like they would own the Oshawa Centre. They would own the Eaton Centre in Toronto. They would own different industrial and commercial complexes. Then within that same mutual fund, you could have some bonds, some government bonds and some corporate bonds, some short-term bonds that are only going to mature in a year or two, and some long-term bonds that will provide you guaranteed income for the next 10 or 15 years. You'll also likely have some cash, either directly in your portfolio or within your own bank account. And then we have other things like gold or precious metals. Again, through the stock side of things, we invest in companies that own shares of mining companies or resource companies and so on. Some people own actual physical coins or bars of silver or gold. But whenever something happens in the markets, not all markets are affected equally. So if it's really bad for stocks, then going back to the COVID crisis in 2020, when that chart that Chelsea showed, that was the stock market. The stocks really dropped very, very quickly, but bonds actually went up because everybody wanted some safety. And so that helped smooth out the ride for those custom portfolios that had both stocks and bonds in it. So it's just important to make sure that we've got all our money spread around and that we've got enough money set aside for your emergency needs if you have some needs coming up in the short term. Anything else on that, Chelsea, or did I cover it all?
I think you got it all. Thanks, Derek. So now we've talked about goals, we've talked about budgeting, talked a little bit about investments in general. Now we're going to get into the details of RSPs, tax-free savings accounts, and the first home savings account. So we'll start with RSPs. Many of you are probably very familiar with RSPs and utilizing them as a retirement vehicle. So let's just go into a few different details of what is an RSP and how do they work. So they are tax deductible. So we'll look at this example in the middle of the screen here. Just for an example, say your taxable income was $95,000 and you have an RSP that you contributed $5,000 to. Your taxable income then becomes $90,000. So it actually deducts your income dollar for dollar. Another benefit of an RSP is whatever you contribute into the plan becomes tax-free. So any kind of growth that you earn, whether it's interest, dividends, capital gains, anything inside the RSP is completely tax-free until you make a withdrawal. As you likely know, whenever you withdraw from an RSP, there is a certain amount of tax that needs to be withheld on your withdrawals. There is, however, one scenario when withdrawals are tax-free from an RSP, and we'll get to that on this slide here. So again, beginning with number one, the main point, there are tax advantages to RSPs, and that's being your contributions are tax deductible, which directly reduce your taxable income. Again, long-term growth, investing in RSPs allow your money to grow tax-free until you eventually withdraw. We'll talk about a specific example on the next slide. Retirement savings, they are a powerful tool for building a sizable retirement nest egg. And lastly, for first-time home buyers, there's a home buyer's plan under the RSP, which allows you to withdraw up to $35,000 to go towards the purchase of your first home. The only catch, though, is with this kind of plan, you must repay the $35,000 or whatever amount you end up withdrawing. Maybe you only need $20,000, but you must repay that over a period of 15 years. They do give you a 2-year grace period, however. So, for example, if you bought your house this year and made a withdrawal from your RSP in 2024, you wouldn't have to start repaying that amount until 2026. If for whatever reason you miss repaying that amount to your RSP in 2026, all they do is add it in as income and you end up paying taxes on it at that time. Over the years, the government has actually brought in quite a few good things for first-time home buyers. This plan actually started at $25,000 that you could withdraw. And I think it was last year or 2022 when they bumped it up to $35,000. And this is per person. So if it's you and your spouse, you can each withdraw up to $35,000 tax-free under the home buyer's plan within your RSP. So let's look at this magic number, $50,000. And this is taxable income. If you're earning over $50,000 of taxable income, this is where we typically recommend to our clients to make an RSP contribution. Not sure if you're aware or not, but the tax bracket of $50,000 and under is between 15% and 20%. Anything over that, you're starting to pay more tax. So while you're in your higher income earning years, your tax bracket could be upwards of 40%. So the real advantage of an RSP is contributing into an RSP when your tax bracket is higher, for example, 40%. And then later, once you've retired, your tax bracket is hopefully much lower. And then when you start withdrawing, pay maybe 20% tax on your withdrawals. So you have an overall tax benefit of 20%. And just a little side note here, if you still need to make your RSP contribution, the deadline for 2023 is February 29th. Yes, it is a leap year, so you do have one extra day to make that contribution if you need to. So that's RSPs. Derek, did I miss anything on that, or shall we move to tax-free savings accounts?
No, just don't call us on the 29th. We don't want to hear a call. Invest before then. Don't leave it to the last minute. Okay, so understanding tax-free savings accounts. This is an even better invention than sliced bread. In fact, it's the best investment invention that has come out from the government since I don't know when. The only one drawback is, unlike an RRSP where you get a tax deduction and you get a tax break when you put money into it, there's no tax deduction. You can put money in, but it doesn't show up on your tax return. That also ends up being the good news, because whatever you put in there grows tax-free. And when you take it out, there's no tax. The government doesn't know. It's sort of like having your own secret Cayman Island account right here in Canada, legally agreed to by the government. So let's take a look at what that looks like in a little bit more detail. So unlike an RRSP that you need to earn some income to figure out what your contribution limit is, the TFSA contribution limit is stipulated just by your age and by whatever the government has told us it is. So how much you can contribute to an RSP, to a tax-free saving account in 2024 is $7,000. $7,000 for every person above the age of 18. Now, if you're over 18, maybe a few years over 18 like myself, and you've had a plan for a number of years, you can catch up on any past contributions if you didn't make them in previous years. So I can put in 7,000 for this year, plus any previous year that I missed. And if you're like many of our clients that have used this to shelter some money and then take it out to buy a car, go on a holiday or something, if you've taken your money out, once we cross over into the next calendar year, you can replace every dollar that you took out. So it gets to be a little bit complicated in how much you can contribute, but it is actually very carefully and closely tracked. So going back to 2009, when they first brought it in, if you were 18 in 2009, you could have contributed $5,000 to a tax-free savings account. And as you can see on the slide on the right-hand side, amounts have gone up, gone down, and now they're going back up again to where the last 3 years, we were at $6,000 per person in 2022. Because of inflation, there's the good side of inflation. We got to increase it to $6,500 in 2023. And again, inflation has slowed down, but it still bumped us up to the $7,000 for 2024. So as a couple, you can now put in $14,000 into your respective TFSAs. If you've started from day one, or if you haven't started at all and you were 18 in 2009 and you got an inheritance or won the lottery or got a big raise, you can actually put $95,000 into a tax-free savings account today to catch you right up to the maximum. So that's where we go. And so people can have quite a large sum of money in their tax-free accounts right now and be looking forward to some very nice tax-free withdrawals in the future. So again, key points: any money within the tax-free account is tax-free. We have one client, a quite young fellow, was doing some stocks on his own, took some gambles on some risky things, and his tax-free saving account is $250,000. No tax on it because he took a big risk. Once he took that big risk, came to us and says, I was lucky. Can you help me manage this now? Because the opposite also happens. We have a client that also did, a little older client that also took a flyer on a few things, and her tax-free account now is down only to about 40,000, half of what she could have invested. Just because if it goes down, that's too bad. It goes down, government doesn't know about it. If you make a lot of money, so tax-free growth is important. As I mentioned, you can withdraw money if it's for your first home, if it's for a holiday, if it's for a car. If you're expecting a real nice Valentine's Day for your wife and don't have the cash, you can pull some money out of your tax-free account and make her really happy. Unused contribution room, as we mentioned, if you weren't able to contribute the maximum each year going along, you can now catch it all up when you have some kind of windfall. And inside the tax-free account, you can have a variety of investment options. And that's what we're seeing in many of our clients. Some say, I want, $10,000 put aside for a trip I'm taking next year. Well, we'll put it in a cash account or a 1-year GIC. But some will say, oh, I'm not going to touch this money till I retire or for 20 years. Then we would put that into the higher growth investments they have so we can get as much growth as we can and make the tax-free saving account as big as possible. I think that's it on tax-free savings accounts. Chelsea.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you. Just wanted to put an example here, or you might be wondering, so when would I use an RSP versus a tax-free savings account? So we come back to that magic number. So if your taxable income is under $50,000, there's real no tax advantage to using an RSP. So why not save your contribution room until you're in a higher tax bracket and then start using an RSP? So if your income is under that threshold, that's when we bring in the tax-free savings account and start allocating our clients' money towards that. Another example, maybe you've used up all of your contribution room in your RSP. So then we would turn to the tax-free savings account, as it's still tax-free. You don't receive a tax deduction, but at least you can still invest and earn tax-free income within it. Okay, so let's move on to the new first home savings account. So this was announced in the 2022 federal budget, and it became available to eligible Canadians in 2023. So it is a registered account with tax advantages, and the objective is to help more Canadians get into the housing market. As we know, for millennials these days, it's very hard to get into the housing market with the house prices where they are. Even with higher interest rates, it's harder to get a mortgage. So the government has actually introduced a few different helpful things for people trying to get into the housing market. So let's go into who is eligible. Just like a tax-free savings account, you have to be at least 18 years old and Canadian resident. And you must not have owned a home in which you have lived in the previous 4 years before the account is open. So same thing for the RSP home buyers plan. You have to qualify as a first-time home buyer, which means you cannot have owned a home within the 4 years prior. So same thing goes for this account. What can you use your savings for within this account? It can only be used for the purchase of a primary residence, not for an investment property or leisure properties. So you have to physically be planning to live in this house and not use it as a rental or say for a vacation home in Florida. What are the contribution rules? So just like the tax-free savings account, you can put in up to a certain amount each year, which is $8,000 for the first home savings account. The government has also set a lifetime contribution limit, which is $40,000. So if you add in $8,000, you could put in $8,000 for 5 years to reach $40,000. And say you open a first home savings account in 2024, you only have $4,000 to put in this year. You can carry forward the extra $4,000 contribution room into 2025. Say you received an inheritance and you come into a large sum of money, you can put in that extra $4,000 plus the annual contribution room of $8,000 for 2025. And those contribution rooms are carried forward indefinitely. So what are the benefits of this account? It's completely tax-free. Contributions to the first home savings account are tax deductible, which will lower your taxable income. Withdrawals are tax-free, and any gains or profits made inside the account are tax-free. So when we're looking at these differences, we're like, this seems like a tax-free savings account, but then it also seems like an RSP. So we like to call it a hybrid. So let's look at the differences now between the home buyer's plan, which is the RSP withdrawal, versus this first home savings account. Under the home buyer's plan, it allows Canadian residents to withdraw tax-free funds up to $35,000 from your RSP for your first home. However, under the home buyer's plan, you have up to 15 years to repay the funds back to your RSP, and the repayment period starts the second year after your withdrawal, as we discussed previously. However, under the first home savings account, funds withdrawn from it do not have to be paid back into the account. So take the money out, never have to worry about it again. You might ask if you have the option to use both. Yes, you can take advantage of the home buyer's plan in combination with the first home savings account. So you can save up to $35,000 in your RSP, as well as maximize the first home savings account over the next few years up to $40,000, and then have $75,000 of tax-free money available to you to purchase your first home. So let's look at the bottom part here. What happens if I do not use the first home savings account to purchase a first home? So maybe one of your goals for the next few years is I really want to purchase a home. Let's start plugging money away into these two plans. By the time 3 years comes up, or you come to the conclusion that buying a home is just not for you, and that goal is eliminated. So what happens to this first home savings account? Any withdrawals other than purchasing your first home will be considered taxable income. So after 3 years, you're not going to buy a home, but you want to access some of this money, you have to pay taxes on those withdrawals. There's another stipulation that you can only have this account open for 15 years, or if you turn 71 years old. You either need to withdraw the funds or the account needs to be closed. However, they do give you an option. If 15 years has come up or you've turned 71, you can transfer the funds on a tax-free basis to your RSP or RIF account. An important note here, though, these transfers do not impact your RSP contribution room, so you don't have to worry about that. So I think that covers majority of the details for the first home savings account. Derek, unless you have something else to add, do you mind just touching base on these three plans and how they are either similar or how they differ?
Okay, let's do that. Chelsea's done a nice little graphic here. But the first thing is, if you already own a home, then you can forget about the first home savings account, unless you have a child or a grandchild that doesn't have a home yet. And this would be part of your estate legacy planning. You could help your child or grandchild out by perhaps funding one for them to help them get a leg up on that. But anyhow, let's take a look at these three different accounts. So first thing is, are they tax deductible? Are the contributions to make tax deductible? And to the first home savings account and the RSP, yes, they are. But as we mentioned before, tax-free savings account, no. So if you're in a high tax bracket, and maybe making an RSP contribution would be more beneficial. You could use the tax savings to then put into the tax-free savings account. Do the funds inside the account grow tax-free? Yes, all of them have that same tax sheltering ability. Whatever it grows to is totally tax-free. Are the withdrawals tax-free or non-taxable if taken out on the first home to put towards your first home? The answer is yes, across the board with a stipulation. The first home savings account, obviously you can only contribute $40,000 maximum. So whatever that account is, and the RRSP, you can only withdraw 35,000 even if you have 100,000 in your RRSP. The tax-free savings account, there are no limits at all. You can withdraw everything that's in your tax-free savings account and no taxes paid. So which plans are available only to first-time home buyers? Well, obviously the first home savings account is only available to that. And that first $35,000 of your regular RRSP, if it's your first home, then you can take it out for that. Tax-free savings account, it's not limited to that. You can take it out for anything and everything. What about, do the withdrawals need to be paid back? Well, the RRSP, home buyer's plan, that maximum $35,000, that's the only one that has to be paid back. The first home savings account, once you take the money out and spend it on your home, great, that's done. That's your down payment or whatever. And your tax-free savings account, you have the choice to, you can put it back in if you want to, but you don't have to. And if you weren't able to contribute the maximum each year, can you carry it forward? And it's a definite yes to all three plans. The government's very good that way. They like to sort of get extra tax money by knowing that people are procrastinators. So if we're allowed to carry things forward, they know that people won't maximize it every year. I think there would be a lot more money in TFSAs and RRSPs if we lost that deduction every year because people would be more prone to take advantage of it. But we can carry it forward, and if you get a windfall, then you can catch up on all of those things. And is the contribution based on the income that you earn? No, only the RRSP. You have to have some earned income. So self-employed earnings, actually rental income counts towards that. So a few things, but basically getting a T4 slip or being self-employed, that's the only way you get an RSP contribution limit. Tax-free savings account, it's just set by the government. And right now it's $7,000 a year. And for the first home savings account, maximum $8,000 a year. And that's it, but it doesn't matter as long as you're over 18, you can contribute those amounts. So we've wrapped that up. Unless you've got anything to add to that, Chelsea, then I think we're ready for some questions. And just a note that this is being recorded, and once we get approval from compliance, we will post it, and we'll let everybody know about that. So if you do have a child, a friend, where this may not be applicable to you, but might be applicable to them, then they can go and watch it at their leisure.
Yes. And also, if you do have a friend or family that could use some advice on best options for them, should they do a first home savings account, RSP, tax-free, maybe a combination of the three, please feel free to connect them with us via email or phone. We are happy to help anyone and everyone. So you'll see on this slide here on the right-hand side, Let's Get Social. We are present on many different social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. YouTube is where we will be posting the recording of this webinar within a couple days, so we'll let you know when that's available. But feel free to also give us a follow. We do post 2 times a week of financial literacy tips. So if you or maybe friend, family, child is in need of some financial advice, just direct them over to our social media pages and we can help them out. And also just wanted to touch base here. Our next webinar is set for May 1st, and the topic will be on the cost of aging. So let's get into some questions. Just give everyone a couple minutes. If you're in Zoom, there should be a chat box at the bottom, and you can just type any questions that you have in there, and we can answer those for you. We did actually get a couple questions. When you're booking the meeting, you're able to put in a question. So let's go to those while we're waiting to see if anyone on live here has any questions. So one of the questions is it worth it to put money into a first home savings account, even if I'm not in a high tax bracket? Derek, why don't you lead the way on that question?
Okay, yes, I think it's still beneficial if you're planning on buying a house and at some point you'll be in a higher tax bracket, because just because you put money into the RSP doesn't mean you have to claim the deduction this year. You can carry it forward. So that means, like, let's say that you just graduated from university and you're only got half a year's worth in, and you've got, say, a $20,000, $25,000 income this year. You can still put the $8,000 in, but don't claim it on your tax return this year. On your notice of assessment, it'll have a little notice on it saying, oh, RSP contributions made, but not yet claimed. So next year, the year after, when you're in a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 income bracket, you can call on that money to give you a tax deduction at that higher level of income. So yes, if you're planning on buying a house and you've got some money, it's still beneficial to put it into the FHSA, because it will give you an RSP deduction either in the current year, or you can carry it forward to a future year when you're in a higher tax bracket, but you'll be able to take all that money out and use it for your down payment without having to pay anything back.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question here. Can I open a tax-free savings account or even a first home savings account for my children or grandchildren and start contributing for them? Unfortunately, no, you cannot. The government has put in certain limitations because contribution limits are set for individuals. It actually has to be your child or grandchild to open the account and deposit from their own bank account, but you can still choose to gift your children or grandchildren a sum of money, and then they can then go and contribute to this account directly themselves. And one more question here. Can I have more than one tax-free savings account, first home savings account, or RSP? Derek, why don't you take that one?
Well, the simple answer is yes, but the real question is, why would you want to? It complicates life. And the thing is, you can have as many accounts as you want, but as I said, it does complicate your life. And the other thing that happens is all of those plans have specific limits, and that's per individual, not for how many accounts. So if you open up 3 tax-free savings accounts, you can still only put $7,000 in. And the real danger with that comes in, and we've had this happen to clients of ours, where we have been maximizing their tax-free savings account, usually in the early part of the year. And their bank, because they've got some extra money sitting in the bank account, the bank says, oh, you should put that in a tax-free savings account. This year's limit is $7,000. So the client, again, I'm not there for the conversation, so I don't know exactly what went on. But we don't find out about that until the next March or April. Just like your T4 slips, the tax-free savings slips don't get into the government until February, March of the following year. And then the government says, oh, you contributed to $7,000 to Asante, and you contributed $7,000 to your local bank. You are over contributed by $7,000 per month. So you have a 1% per month penalty to pay us because you over contributed, and you have to take that $7,000 out right away. So if you have multiple accounts, that's the big downside, is that you could accidentally end up over contributing and end up with a big tax bill surprise because of that. So yes, you can have many, but it's only in rare circumstances that it really makes sense.
Wonderful. So that seems to be all the questions that we have for today. If you do think of any in the next few days or down the road, we will be sending out an email to each of you with the recording once that's ready. So you can always feel free to email us or give us a phone call. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, if either you don't have a trusted financial advisor or family, friend, child is in need of some assistance, feel free to direct them over to us. We'd be happy to help them. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending our webinar today. We hope you got some important little tidbits of information out of it, and we hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.